The Concert for Bangladesh was the collective name for two benefit concerts organized by former Beatles lead guitarist George Harrison and Indian sitar master Ravi Shankar. The concerts were held at 2:30 and 8 p.m. on Sunday, 1 August 1971, at Madison Square Garden in New York City. The shows were organized to raise international awareness and fund relief efforts for refugees from East Pakistan, following the Bangladesh Liberation War-related genocide. The concerts were followed by a best-selling live album, a boxed 3-record set, and Apple Films' concert documentary, which opened in cinemas in the spring of 1972. The event was the first-ever benefit concert of such a magnitude and featured a supergroup of performers that included Harrison, fellow ex-Beatle Ringo Starr, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Billy Preston, Leon Russell and the band Badfinger. In addition, Shankar and Ali Akbar Khan, both of whom had ancestral roots in Bangladesh, performed an opening set of Indian classical music. Decades later, Shankar would say of the overwhelming success of the event, "In one day, the whole world knew the name of Bangladesh. It was a fantastic occasion." The concerts were attended by a total of 40,000 people and raised close to $250,000 for Bangladesh relief, which was administered by UNICEF. Although the project was subsequently marred by financial problems, a result of the pioneering nature of the venture, the Concert for Bangladesh is recognized as a highly successful and influential humanitarian aid project, generating both awareness and considerable funds, as well as providing valuable lessons and inspiration for projects that follow, notably Live Aid. By 1985, through revenue raised from the Concert for Bangladesh Live album and film, an estimated $12 million had been sent to Bangladesh in relief. Sales of the live album and DVD release of the film continue to benefit the George Harrison Fund for UNICEF. Background: as East Pakistan struggled to become the separate state of Bangladesh during the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War, the political and military turmoil and associated atrocities led to a massive refugee problem, with at least 7 million displaced people pouring into neighboring India. East Pakistan had recently endured devastation as a result of the Bola cyclone, and the Bengalis' desperate plight increased in March that year when torrential rains and floods arrived in the region, threatening a humanitarian disaster. Quoting figures available at the time, a Rolling Stone feature claimed that up to 500,000 Bengalis had been killed by the cyclone in November 1970, and that the Pakistani Army's subsequent campaign of slaughter under Operation Searchlight accounted for at least 250,000 civilians, by the most conservative estimates. Following the mass exodus to Calcutta, a new threat arrived as the refugees faced starvation and the outbreak of diseases such as cholera. Appalled at the situation affecting his homeland and relatives, Bengali musician Ravi Shankar first brought the issue to the attention of his friend George Harrison in the early months of 1971, over dinner at Friar Park, according to Klaus Vormann's recollection. By April, Shankar and Harrison were in Los Angeles working on the soundtrack to the film Raga, during which Harrison wrote the song Miss Odell, commenting on corruption among the Indian authorities as aid shipments of rice from the West kept going astray on way to Bombay. After returning to England to produce Badfinger's Straight Up album and take part in sessions for John Lennon's Imagine, all the while being kept abreast of developments by Shankar via newspaper and magazine cuttings, Harrison was back in LA to finish the Raga album in late June. By then, the Sunday Times in London had just published an influential article by Pakistani journalist Anthony Mascarenhas, which exposed the full horror of the Bangladesh atrocities, and a distraught Shankar approached Harrison for help in trying to alleviate the suffering. Harrison later talked of spending 3 months on the phone organizing the concert for Bangladesh, implying that efforts were underway from late April onwards. It is widely acknowledged that the project began in earnest during the last week of June 1971. However, 5 or 6 weeks before the event took place on the 1st of August, preparation. Shankar's original hope was to raise $25,000 through a benefit concert of his own, accompanied perhaps by actor Peter Sellers. With Harrison's commitment and the record and film outlets available to him through the Beatles' Sepulchre organization, the idea soon grew to become a star-studded musical event mixing Western rock with Indian classical music, and it was to be held at the most prestigious venue in America, Madison Square Garden, in New York City. According to Chris O'Dell, a music business administrator and former Apple employee, Harrison got off the phone with Shankar once the concept had been finalized, and started enthusing with wife Pattie Boyd and her about possible performers. Ringo Starr, Lennon, Eric Clapton, Leon Russell, Jim Geldner, Vorman, Billy Preston and Badfinger were all mentioned during this initial brainstorming. O'Dell set about contacting local musicians from the Harrisons' rented house in Nichols Canyon, as Harrison took the long-distance calls, hoping more than anything to secure Bob Dylan's participation. Almost all of Harrison's first-choice names signed on immediately, while a day spent boating with Memphis musician Don Nix resulted in the latter agreeing to organize a group of backing singers. A local Indian astrologer had advised early August is a good time in which to stage the concert, and as things transpired, the first of that month, a Sunday, was the only day that Madison Square Garden was available at such short notice. By the first week of July, Harrison was in a Los Angeles studio recording his purpose-written song, Bangladesh, with co-producer Phil Spector. The song's opening verse documents Shankar's plea to Harrison for assistance, and the lyrics, "My friend came to me with sadness in his eyes, told me that he wanted help before his country dies," provided an enduring image for what United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan later recognized as the basic human aspect behind the cause. Harrison then met with Badfinger in London to explain that he would have to abandon work on Straight Up, before flying to New York on the 13th of July to see Lennon. During the middle of July also, once back in Los Angeles, Harrison produced Shankar's Bangladesh benefit record, an EP titled Joy Bangla. The latter featured contributions from East Bengal-born Ali Akbar Khan on sarod and tabla player Ala Raka. As with Harrison's Bangladesh, all profits from this recording would go to the newly established George Harrison Ravi Shankar Special Emergency Relief Fund, to be distributed by UNICEF. Also around the middle of July, the upcoming concert by George Harrison and friends was announced via a minuscule ad buried in the back pages of the New York Times. Author Nicholas Schaffner wrote in 1977. Tickets sold out in no time, leading to the announcement of a second show, towards the end of the month, when all parties were due to meet in New York for rehearsals. Harrison had the commitment of a backing band comprising Preston on keyboards, the 4 members of Badfinger on acoustic rhythm guitars and tambourine, Vorman and Keldner on bass and drums, respectively, and saxophonist Jim Hornsey called Hollywood Horns, which included Chuck Findlay, Jackie Kelso and Lou McCreary. Of the established stars, Leon Russell had committed also, but on the proviso that he be supported by members of his tour band. Eric Clapton insisted that he too would be there, even if Odell and other insiders, knowing of the guitarist's incapacity due to severe heroin addiction, were surprised that Harrison had considered him for the occasion. Among Harrison's former bandmates, Lennon initially agreed to take part in the concert without his wife and musical partner Yoko Ono, as Harrison had apparently stipulated. Lennon then allegedly had an argument with Ono as a result of this agreement and left New York in a rage 2 days before the concerts. Starr's commitment had never been in question, and he interrupted the filming of his movie Blind Man in Almeria, Spain, in order to attend. Paul McCartney declined to take part, however, citing the bad feelings caused by the Beatles' legal problems on the breakup. Rehearsals. The Harrisons decamped to the Park Lane Hotel in New York City, and the first rehearsal took place on Monday, the 26th of July, at NOLA Studios on West 57th Street. Harrison had written a possible set list for the concert while sketching design ideas for Shankar's Joy Bangla picture sleeve, as well as the songs he would go on to perform on the 1st of August. Harrison's list included his own compositions, All Things Must Pass with Leon, apparently Art of Dying, and the just-recorded B-side, Deep Blue. Clapton's song Let It Rain appeared also, while the suggestions for Dylan's set were If Not For You, Watching the River Flow, and Blowin' in the Wind. Only Harrison, Vorman, the six-piece horn section, and Badfinger's Pete Ham, Joey Molland, Tom Evans and Mike Gibbons were at NOLA Studios on that first day, and subsequent rehearsals were similarly carried out in dribs and drabs. As Harrison put it, only the final run-through, on the night before the concert, resembled a complete band rehearsal. On Tuesday, the 27th of July, Harrison and Shankar, accompanied by a pipe-smoking Alan Klein, held a press conference to promote the two shows. Notoriously performance-shy, Harrison admitted, "Just thinking about it makes me shake." The Bangladesh charity single was issued in America on the 28th of July, with a UK release following 2 days later. Ringo Starr arrived on the Thursday, and by Friday the 30th of July, Russell was in town, interrupting his US tour. Russell's band members Claudia Lanier and Don Preston were added to Don Nix's choir of backing singers. Preston would switch to lead guitar for Russell's solo spot during the shows, just as bassist Carl Radle would replace Vorman temporarily. By this point, Clapton's participation was gravely in doubt, and Harrison had drafted in Jesse Ed Davis as a probable replacement. The ex-Taj Mahal guitarist received last-minute coaching from Vorman, who was more than familiar with Harrison's songs, as well as those by Billy Preston and Starr. The final rehearsal, or the first for some of the participants, was combined with the concert soundcheck at Madison Square Garden, late on the 31st of July. Both Dylan and Clapton finally appeared at the soundcheck that night. Even then, Clapton was in the early stages of heroin withdrawal. Only a cameraman supplying him with some methadone would result in the English guitarist taking the stage the following day, after his young girlfriend had been unsuccessful in purchasing uncut heroin for him on the street. To Harrison's frustration, Dylan was having severe doubts about performing in such a big event atmosphere and still would not commit to playing. "Look, it's not my scene either," Harrison countered. "At least you've played on your own in front of a crowd before. I've never done that." Through Harrison's friendship with the band, Jonathan Taplin served as production manager, while Chip Monk was in charge of lighting. Gary Kellgren from the nearby record plant was brought in to record the concerts, overseen by Spector, and Klein's people, led by director Saul Swimmer, would handle the filming of the event. The official concert photographers were Tom Wilkes and Barry Feinstein, the pair responsible for the artwork on Harrison's acclaimed 1970 triple album, All Things Must Pass. concert program, afternoon show, except for brief support roles in December 1969 for both the Delaney and Amp Bonnie and Friends Band and Lenin's Plastic Ono Band. The concert for Bangladesh was Harrison's first live appearance before a paying audience since the Beatles had quit touring in August 1966. Dylan had stopped touring that same year, although he had made a moderately successful comeback in August 1969 at the Isle of Wight Festival, his most recent live performance at this point. Speaking in 2005, Rolling Stone founder Jan Wenner described the buzz preceding the first concert for Bangladesh show as being at a level unexperienced in New York since the Beatles' 1966 visit. In his role as Master of Ceremonies, Harrison began the afternoon show by asking the audience to try to get into the opening Indian music portion of the program. He then introduced Ravi Shankar and the latter's fellow musicians, Saroja Ali Akbar Khan, tabla player Ala Raka, and Kamala Chakravarti on tambura. Shankar first explained the reason for the concerts, after which the four musicians performed a traditional dun, in the format of a khyal rather than a standard raga titled Bangla Dun. The set included a second piece, authors Chip Madinga and Mark Easter suggest, citing Harrison's own description that each show's Indian music segment lasted for 3/4 of an hour, whereas only 17 minutes of music appears on the Concert for Bangladesh live album. The recital was afforded a fidgety respect from fans eager to discover the identity of Harrison's advertised friends. Although the audience's goodwill was more than evident, a short intermission ensued while the stage was cleared and a Dutch TV film was shown, displaying footage of the atrocities and natural tragedies taking place in former East Pakistan. To thunderous applause from the New York crowd, Harrison appeared on stage along with his temporary band, comprising Ringo Starr, a very sick Eric Clapton, Leon Russell, Billy Preston, Klaus Voormann, Jim Keltner and 18 others. Backed by this full Phil Spector, All Things Must Pass rock orchestra, Harrison began the western portion of the concert with Wah Wah, followed by his Beatles hit song Something and the gospel rocker Waiting on You All. Harrison then handed the spotlight over to Preston, who performed his only sizable hit, That's the Way God Planned It, followed by Starr, whose song It Don't Come Easy had recently established the drummer as a solo artist. Nicholas Schaffner was in the audience for this first show and later described Starr's turn as having received the biggest ovation of the afternoon. Next up was Harrison's Beware of Darkness, with guest vocals on the third verse by Russell, who covered the song on his concurrent album, Leon Russell and the Shelter People. After pausing to introduce the band, Harrison followed this with one of the best received moments in both the shows, a charging version of the White Album track While My Guitar Gently Weeps, featuring him and Clapton dueling on lead guitar during the long instrumental play-out. Both the band introduction and While My Guitar Gently Weeps are among the few selections from the afternoon show that were included on the album and in the film. Another one was Leon Russell's medley of the Rolling Stones' Jumpin' Jack Flash and the Coasters' Young Blood, which was also a highlight of Russell's live shows at the time. With Don Preston crossing the stage to play lead guitar with Harrison, there were now temporarily 4 electric guitarists in the lineup. Don Preston, Harrison and Claudia Lanier supplied supporting vocals behind Russell. In an effective change of pace, Harrison picked up his acoustic guitar, now alone on the stage save for Pete Ham on a second acoustic, and Don Nix's gospel choir off to stage left. The ensuing bestselling "Here Comes the Sun," the first live performance of the song. As for Harrison's other Beatle compositions, Played Today was also warmly received. At this point, Harrison switched back to his white Fender Stratocaster electric guitar and, as recounted to Anthony D. Curtis in 1987, he looked down at the setlist taped to the body of the guitar and saw the word Bob followed by a question mark. "And I looked around," Harrison recalled of Bob Dylan's entrance, "and he was so nervous. He had his guitar on and his shades. He was sort of coming. It was only at that moment that I knew for sure he was going to do it." Quote, among the audience, Schaffner wrote, "There was total astonishment at this new arrival, as Harrison had envisaged. Dylan's mini-set was the crowning glory of the concert for Bangladesh for many observers. Backed by just Harrison, Russell and Starr on tambourine, Dylan played 5 of his decade-defining songs from the 1960s. A Hard Rain's They're Gonna Fall, Blowin' in the Wind, It Takes a Lot to Laugh, It Takes a Train to Cry, Love -0, No Limit, and Just Like a Woman." Harrison and the band then returned to perform a final segment consisting of "Hear Me Lord" and his recent international #1 hit, "My Sweet Lord," followed by the song of the moment, "Bangladesh." Evening show. Harrison was reportedly delighted with the outcome of the first show, as was Dylan, who accompanied him back to the Park Lane Hotel afterwards. They discussed possible changes to the set list for the evening performance, beginning at 8 p.m. The songs played and the sequence differed slightly between the first and second shows, most noticeably with Harrison's opening and closing mini-sets. After "Wah Wah," he brought "My Sweet Lord" forward in the order, followed by "Waiting on You All," before handing over to Billy Preston. The afternoon's creaky "Hear Me Lord" was dropped, so that the post-Dylan band segment consisted of only 2 numbers, "Something" to close the show, and a particularly passionate reading of "Bangladesh" as an encore. Dylan likewise made some changes, swapping "Blowin' in the Wind" and "It Takes a Lot to Laugh" in the order, and then playing the well-received "Mr. Tambourine Man" in place of Love -0. The second show was widely acknowledged as superior to the afternoon performance, although Village Voice reviewer Don Heckman noted that many in the audience reacted to the Shankar Khan opening set with a lack of respect. Not aiding the Indian musicians was the failure of a microphone on Rakka's hand drums, Heckman observed, so denying the crowd a vital element of the musical interplay between sitar and sarod. During the western portion of the show, Harrison's voice was more confident this time around, the music perhaps slightly more lustrous. According to Rolling Stone, towards the end of "That's the Way God Planned It," Preston felt compelled to get up from behind his Hammond organ and take a show-stealing boogie across the front of the stage. Dylan's walk-on was again the show's real cortex-snapping moment, Heckman opined. Dylan finished his final song, "Just Like a Woman," with a victorious salute, holding up both fists like a strong man. Rolling Stone's reviewer remarked shortly afterwards, following Dylan's set, Harrison introduced the band, before taking the show to yet another peak with "Something." Watching from the wings, Patty Harrison described her husband's performance throughout that evening as magnificent. Following the 2 sellout concerts, all the participants attended a celebratory party in a basement club known as Ungarno's. Dylan was so elated, Harrison recalled 16 years later, "He picked me up and hugged me and he said, 'God, if only we'd done 3 shows.'" Like Harrison, the experience of playing the Madison Square Garden did not lead to Dylan immediately re-embracing the concert stage, only a brief guest appearance with the band on New Year's Eve 1971-72, and sitting in during a John Prine Club gig eventuated before he returned to touring in January 1974. The post-concert party featured live performances from Harrison and Preston, after which a roaring drunk Phil Spector played a unique version of Da Do Ron Ron. The celebrations broke up in the early hours once Keith Moon of The Who began smashing up the drum kit, which actually belonged to Badfinger's Mike Gibbons. Reviews. Harrison's manager, Alan Klein, immediately boasted of the entirely peaceful nature of the event. There was no rioting. Not one policeman was allowed in there. Zero. Quote, "In fact, as reported in the Village Voice on the 12th of August midway through the evening show, a crowd of 200 non-ticket holders charged and broke through the doors of Madison Square Garden." Aside from this episode, press reports concerning the Concert for Bangladesh shows were overwhelmingly positive. The appearance of Bob Dylan on the same stage as two former Beatles caused a sensation, and lavish praise was bestowed on George Harrison. "Beatlemania sweeps a city" was a typical headline, and in Britain the NME declared the concerts the greatest rock spectacle of the decade. Billboard described the artists' performances as the best music ever and commented on the likelihood of a live album from the concerts. "There is no politics involved. What is involved is starving children and, for once, relief through 35 musicians who should represent the feeling of anyone who loves the music." Dylan's choice of songs, particularly the apocalyptic "A Hard Rain's They're Gonna Fall," were found to have a new relevance in the context of the early 1970s. "The words made the more chilling for the passage of years," opined Rolling Stone. The same publication stated of Starr's contribution, "Seeing Ringo Starr drumming and singing on stage has a joy in it that is one of the happiest feelings on earth still." Ravi Shankar's role as concert instigator and the true conscience of the UNICEF shows was also noted. Musically, The Village Voice observed, "The pairing of Shankar and Ali Akbar Khan was almost as unique as the mix of Dylan and Harrison." In the wider countercultural context of the time, with disillusion increasingly rife with each post-Woodstock rock event, commentators viewed the concerts as, in the words of Rolling Stone, a brief incandescent revival of all that was best about the 60s. Writing in 1981, NME critic Bob Wifinden likened it to a rediscovery of faith, adding, "Harrison had put rock music back on course." Quote, among Harrison's biographers, Alan Clayson describes the 1971-72 period covering the concerts and their associated releases as the George Harrison moment, while Gary Tulare has written, "The concert for Bangladesh sealed Harrison's stature as something more than just a major celebrity. He changed the perception of recording artists, making it clear they could be good world citizens too, willing to set aside their egos and paychecks in order to help people who were suffering."